The sun rose lazily over Silverpine Lake, painting the surface in ripples of gold and pink as I stood on the porch of my cabin, coffee steaming in my hands. It was the kind of peace I'd been craving for months: no neighbors, no noise, and most importantly, no HOA letters taped to my door. I had rented the cabin for a very specific reason, though it wasn't for fishing or hiking. Inside, waiting by the fireplace, was a man whose identity could change everything: State Attorney General James Walker. Together, we were reviewing documents that detailed months of financial irregularities, fraudulent permits, and harassment from the Maple Creek Estates HOA, the same association that had made my life miserable. The plan was simple: meet quietly, confirm the evidence, and move forward with a legal case that would finally expose the corruption. But peace and privacy had never been Karen Henderson's strong suits. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, had an uncanny ability to appear where she wasn't wanted. She had already sent 3 warnings to my home about unauthorized renovations that didn't exist, and once even threatened to fine me for parking half an inch over the sidewalk. I had ignored her calls for weeks, and apparently, that was an unforgivable crime. I was scanning through an expense report when I heard the faint crunch of tires on gravel outside. My eyes met Walker's. "Expecting someone?" he asked. I shook my head slowly. The sound of footsteps followed, steady, determined. Then came the metallic rattle of a key scraping against the lock. My stomach dropped. Before I could react, the front door swung open with a sharp crack. There she was, Karen Henderson herself, standing in the doorway like she owned the place. Her blonde hair was pinned tight, her clipboard clutched like a weapon, and her mouth already forming the words I dreaded. "You can't just host gatherings without HOA authorization," she barked. She stomped inside, eyes darting around the cabin lee. Karen blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to process what she'd just heard. The confident, bossy tone she usually carried vanished for a moment, replaced by visible panic. Then, in true Karen fashion, she recovered just enough arrogance to double down. "Well," she said stiffly, "Attorney General or not, this property falls under the Maple Creek Estate's jurisdiction. I have the right to inspect it for compliance." She waved her clipboard like it was a court order. Walker didn't even flinch. He set down his coffee cup, adjusted his tie, and replied evenly, "Mrs. Henderson, this cabin is not part of your HOA. You just unlawfully entered a private property during an active state investigation." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Karen's smug expression cracked for a second, but she forced a laugh that sounded more like a squeak. "An investigation? What on earth are you talking about?" I stepped closer, holding out one of the folders we had been reviewing earlier. "About this," I said. "Fake expense reports, missing HOA funds, and zoning permits that were never approved by the county. All connected to Maple Creek Estates, and signed by you." Karen's face turned ashen. "That's nonsense," she said sharply, snatching the papers from my hand. She flipped through them with shaking fingers, her eyes darting across each line. "This information is confidential. You can't just go through HOA files like this." "That's the problem," Walker said quietly, his voice steady and firm. "These documents were obtained legally through state subpoenas. You've been authorizing personal construction projects with HOA money, and several residents have filed complaints about your intimidation tactics. You've been under review for weeks." Karen's defiance started to crumble. "I was just enforcing community standards," she sputtered, her tone more defensive now. "People in Maple Creek don't follow the rules. Someone has to keep things in order. Walk." The silence after Walker's words seemed to stretch forever. Karen's breathing grew quick and shallow, her eyes flicking between us like a cornered animal. Then, as if remembering who she used to be, the woman who ruled over every neighbor with fines and threats, she tried one last act of control. "You can't prove anything without the board," she snapped, gripping her clipboard again. "They'll back me up." Walker simply nodded toward the window. Outside, a black SUV rolled up the gravel driveway, its doors marked with the seal of the State Attorney General's office. 2 uniformed deputies stepped out, their boots crunching on the frosty ground. Karen's confidence melted. You called the police?" she stammered. "I didn't have to," Walker said. "They were already on their way." Karen's face flushed red, then pale. "This is harassment," she cried as one of the deputies approached. "I'm the victim here. This man," she pointed at me, "has been hiding illegal activities on HOA property." The deputy looked at me, then at Walker, who simply handed over a thick envelope. "Evidence packet," he said. "Bank statements, emails, and surveillance confirming Mrs. Henderson's misuse of HOA funds. She's also trespassing and interfering with a state investigation." Karen's mouth fell open as the deputy began reading her rights. "This is absurd. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." Walker's tone was cool, professional. "You were, Mrs. Henderson." "Not anymore." As they escorted her toward the SUV, her shrill voice echoed across the lake. "You'll regret this. The board won't let this stand." But even she seemed to know her words carried no weight anymore. The icy wind off the lake swallowed her threats before they could reach anyone. Inside the cabin, I sat down heavily, staring into the fire. Walker gathered the remaining folders and placed them into his briefcase. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "It takes courage to stand up to someone like her." I nod. The following weeks unfolded like something out of a courtroom drama. News spread fast across Maple Creek Estates, faster than gossip about lawn height or fence colors ever had. "HOA President arrested for embezzlement and abuse of power," the headlines read. Karen Henderson's picture was everywhere, the once proud enforcer of community order now being escorted into a courthouse in handcuffs. Homeowners who had spent years living under her shadow couldn't help but celebrate quietly. Some baked cookies and left them on each other's porches. Others finally repainted their mailboxes without fear of a violation notice. It felt like a new era had begun. I returned to my lake cabin the next weekend. The air was crisp and cool, the kind that made every breath taste like freedom. The snow had started to dust the tops of the pine trees, and the lake reflected the pale winter sun like a sheet of glass. I set down my duffel bag by the door and stared at the spot where Karen had barged in weeks before. The memory almost felt unreal now, a bad dream that had finally ended. As I sat by the fire, my phone buzzed. It was a call from Attorney General Walker. "Thought you'd like to know," he said. "The investigation led to several arrests on the HOA board. Fraud, extortion, falsifying permits, you name it. You weren't just dealing with one bad apple. You exposed the whole rotten tree." A slow smile spread across my face. "Guess Karen did me a favor by breaking in that day." Walker chuckled softly. "Sometimes karma just needs a little push through the front door." After we hung up, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The lake was silent except for the gentle lapping of water against the dock. I watched a pair of ducks glide across the surface, leaving soft ripples that shimmered under the fading light. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't looking over my shoulder or waiting for another warning letter from the HOA. The fear and frustration